Welcome back. All right, so today we're going to do a truly awful season video. We're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, the 1980-81 season. This is where I came into watching hockey a lot more regularly. I was just really aware of how bad the Winnipeg Jets were that year. They ended up finishing 9-57-14. It was bad right from the start. There really wasn't much hope. Now, 79-80, their first year in the National Hockey League, they were 20-49-11. So this was quite the fall for the final winners of the Avco Cup in the WHA league that was having its struggles and things were falling apart. But the Jets were still a very strong organization, as were the Edmonton Oilers, who joined the NHL at the same time. The difference being that the Jets had a lot more struggles than Edmonton did. We know that. We know Edmonton would end up being a dynasty. So the former 1979 Avco Cup winners end up scoring 246 goals in 80-81. That was 21st in the league. They allowed 400 goals, which is also 21st in the league. This is, of course, out of 21 teams. It was bad. Now, when we look at the fact that they won that final Avco Cup, what did they lose when they came into the NHL? Well, you had to protect players because you weren't just bringing players in. There was an expansion draft, and there were teams that wanted to make claims about players that they had drafted and they believed they had rights to. And the NHL, still carrying a grudge with the WHA, did their best to nerf these teams as much as possible. So Kent Nilsson was lost when they came in, as was Terry Ruskowski, one of their top scorers. Rich Preston also was lost, and Bobby Hull ended up being taken away from the Winnipeg Jets as well. So that's something. Now, Bobby Hull that final year didn't play a ton for the Winnipeg Jets, but still. And the previous year, they had lost both Ulf Nilsson and Anders Hedberg. They had defected from the WHA to the NHL. They both went and played for the New York Rangers. So the Rangers, ahead of their time in the National Hockey League with picking up players from Europe, but the Winnipeg Jets have been doing it since their inception in the WHA. Because if you're looking for players, and there's these two kind of bloated leagues at the time going, well, if you go out and get guys from Europe, you're going to get some skilled guys that other teams aren't going to be all that familiar with, and it changes the game. So it really was tough for the Winnipeg Jets to lose all these players. Of course, Kent Nilsson goes over to the Atlanta Flames, ends up with Calgary, has some pretty good seasons there. They could have used his scoring because they were last in the league. So we look month by month here, and it's just bad. There really isn't a good month here. October, they were 1-6-2. November, they were 0-10-5. So coming out of the end of November, they were 1-16-7. So that's not great. December, they were 1-12. They fired a coach in the middle of that. January, they were 4-7-3. So that's, I guess, better, right? Not as bad. They won 4 out of 14 games. That's not awful. February, they were 1-10-1. March, they were 2-11-1. And April, they were 0-1-2. So they had one or less wins in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 7 months. I mean, April being one of those months. And then they had one win in 3 of those months, 0 wins in 2 of them, 2 wins once, and 4 wins another. It's just, there is no bright, shiny object here, other than the fact that they were going to get the number 1 draft pick in 1981. Which we'll get to. We will get to that. But if we look at the records, the nice thing is the 80-81 season was a balanced schedule. So we had divisions. I don't know why. There was no point in having divisions because every team played every other team in the league 4 times. So they were 0-4. Didn't even get a tie against Buffalo, Edmonton, the LA Kings, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh. Had to be tough with Edmonton. That's the team they came into the league with. They were 0-3-1 against Calgary, Hartford, another team they came into the league with. The Islanders and Washington, they were 0-2-2 against Quebec and Vancouver. So they managed a couple of points against Vancouver and against Quebec, who they committed the league with. They only had a winning record against one team. This is the Colorado Rockies. They finished 2-1-1 against the Rockies. They were 500. They were 2-2 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So 4 of their 9 wins came at the expense of the Colorado Rockies and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we know the Maple Leafs 80s, not great. Colorado Rockies, they're going to be heading to New Jersey soon enough. So how far down in the standings were they? Well, they were 24 points behind 20th place, which was Detroit, and 25 points behind the Colorado Rockies. So it was pretty bad. This was a really rough season. This was basically a situation where if you were playing on these Winnipeg Jets, by the middle of November, playoffs. Yeah, that's where we're at. But 1981, the number one draft pick would be Dale Hawerchuk. So that's the good news coming out of this. The number 22 pick, so the first pick of the second round, was Scott Arniel. Their other picks, I went through their draft picks and I'm like, who? That's basically where we were at too, was that management was an issue. Keep in mind the drafts at this point, the Oilers are hitting them out of the park. Every draft, the Oilers are getting guys. It doesn't matter where they're drafting, they're getting really good players. The Jets are not having that same level of success. Their coaches that year, Tom McVie went 120-7. Bill Sutherland went 6-20-3, which is pretty good because the guy after that was Mike Smith, not the goaltender for the Oilers because this is 1980, so I don't know how that'd be physically possible. But Mike Smith went 2-17-4. 81-82, of course, after this season's done, they ended up finishing 500 the following season, 33-33-14. Remember, this is a league where you have ties. You don't have the three-point game. So 500 was considered a respectable number. And Tom Watt, who was the coach of the Jets that year, won the Jack Adams. He won the Jack Adams for making Winnipeg relevant. And Dale Hawerchuk would win the Calder as well. So all of that pain added up to them getting Dale Hawerchuk. Whether or not that was worth the pain, you'd have to ask a Winnipeg Jets fan from 1981. Dave Christian was their leading scorer that year in 80 games. He had 28 goals, 43 assists, 71 points. Morris Lukowich, who was one of my favorite players at that point, 80 games, 33 goals, 34 assists, 67 points. Mickey DuPont, 80 games, 27 goals, 26 assists. Or no, Norm DuPont, right? 53 points there. Ron Wilson in 77 games had 18 goals, 33 assists, 51 points. And Danny Jeffrion, related to Boom Boom, absolutely, in 78 games, 20 goals, 26 assists, 46 points. Not quite the totals that Boom Boom Jeffrion would have put up if he had been in his prime playing for those Jets. But if you had Boom Boom Jeffrion in his prime playing for the Jets, they don't finish with 9 wins. Dave Babich, 69 games, 6 goals, 38 assists, 44 points. Willie Lindstrom, 72 games, 22 goals, 13 assists for 35 points. Trimper ended up with 56 games played, 15 goals, 14 assists, 29 points for Tim Trimper. Rick Bowness was on this team. So Rick Bowness suffered through this. 45 games played, 8 goals, 17 assists, 25 points. Mo Mantha, one of the better names in hockey history. 58 games, 2 goals, 23 assists, 25 points. So those are your top scorers for the Winnipeg Jets, right? This is not a star-studded lineup. As much as I like Lukowich, as much as I like Christian, not star-studded, especially when you consider what we have in that league at that point with guys like Lafleur, Dion, Gretzky. You know, the drill from the early 80s. And then in net, they just didn't have that consistency in net. Now, I normally don't have goals against average up there, but in this case, it's ridiculous. Michel Dion played 14 games for the Jets. 3-6-3 record, 864 save percentage, 4.84 goals against average. An average night for him, he'd allow almost 5 goals a game. Denny Himmel, 29 games played, 3-20-4 record, 861 save percentage, 4.74 goals against. So his goals against a little better, but his save percentage a little lower, which is part of the reason why I like save percentage better. Marcus Matson, 31 games, 3-21-4 record. So 3 goaltenders had 3 wins that year for the Jets. 866 save percentage, 4.52 goals against average. And then Lustel. So Lustel was one that threw me off because he only played 1 game. He's 0-1, 804 save percentage, goals against average of 10. 10. So I had to look him up. I'm like, all right. So is Lustel one of those ones who was an emergent? Is this like an e-bug situation? No. This was John Ferguson Sr. saying, all right, we've got a goaltending problem in Winnipeg. I think this Lustel guy is going to be our answer. In Saskatoon that season, he had a save percentage of 854. I'm not sure what he was expecting, and I understand save percentages were lower in the 80s. But again, if you have a goaltender coming up from a junior team where his save percentage is in the 850 range, he's probably going to struggle against NHL level competition. So he played 1 game. It was against the Vancouver Canucks. He saved 41 out of 51 shots. They just threw him to the wolves. Here you go. And the 80-81 Canucks aren't anything really to write home about that year. They ended up 0-2-2 against those Canucks. So they were 0-1-2 in games that didn't involve Lustel. And Lustel is an NHL record holder of sorts in that he is still the one goaltender who was allowed 10 goals in the only NHL game he ever played. His hockey career didn't go on much further. He didn't play. I don't think he played pro hockey, and outside of that game in Winnipeg. So it's one of those oddities you look at when you're looking back through stats, and I'm actually kind of mildly surprised that there's even anything on Wikipedia, anything online. It's one of those oddities. And then you had Lindsay Middlebrook. That's another good hockey name. Also, probably would have been a good name for NASCAR. Lindsay Middlebrook around the outside. All right, so 14 games for him, 0-9-3 record, 840 save percentage, 5.99 goals against average. So, yes, I understand that save percentage wasn't the same in the 80s, but yeah, an 860 back then is basically the equivalent of like an 890 now, maybe an 885. Not great. So the goaltending wasn't very good. The defense was not very good. They went through 3 different coaches. They couldn't score enough goals to keep up with teams like Edmonton, the Islanders, and again, it's a balanced schedule, so you're playing every team 4 times. And it was kind of sort of a disaster. And John Ferguson Sr. was doing the best job he could, but yeah, Winnipeg was definitely not one of the success stories coming out of the WHA expansion era. So there you go. The really awful season of the Winnipeg Jets. There wasn't a good month. There wasn't a goaltender you could look at and say, well, he had pretty good numbers. He would have been good overall. Mattson, I thought, was the best of the bunch. Honestly, having watched back then, I thought Mattson was the best of the bunch, but it may very well be seen as faint praise. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, especially if you were a Jets fan back then and you watched that team play. Kudos if you actually attended the games and all that. I understand it would have been cheaper than watching games now, but it would have been tough to be a season ticket holder watching that. That would have been rough. So because they didn't win they didn't win at home or on the road. So again, quoting Harry Neal, the failing is not figuring out where else you can play. So and again, that's sort of it's a general quote. I'm not word for word, but that was his failing. He said as a coach for the Canucks, and I think it matches here too. Failing is we can't win on the road. We can't win at home. I can't figure out where else we can play. So, all right, there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.